So I'd like to draw everyone's attention. There's a large cottonwood tree south of the Old Main building, kind of to the northwest here. This is always a good tree to take a minute to talk about. Without a doubt, in my mind, it is one of the oldest trees on campus, and I feel very comfortable saying it is the oldest. Remember, Old Main was built 1874, 1876. A gentleman in Norland doing some research 8 or 10 years ago stumbled across a copy of an invoice to the University of Colorado from 1879 when they purchased 42 cottonwood seedlings for the huge sum of $52. The invoice was made out to Professor Sewell, who was not only the professor but also the president of the university at that time. And the term at the bottom of the invoice says the tree will be replaced within 1 year if well taken care of and protected from stock. So as campus was first being developed, they actually had cattle grazing around the base of Old Main. So the gentleman wanted to be sure that the tree was going to be protected from those cows who would probably just devour it. So a cottonwood tree is not necessarily a long-lived tree.
No.
And I am endlessly fascinated with how this tree has been able to last since, let's call it 1880. 120 gets you to 2000, or 140 years. Most cottonwoods do not live that long. In fact, it's very rare. So one of the things this tree has going for it is we are in the Norland Quad, and if you just look a little further to the west, you'll see a remnant of the flood irrigation channel. So as early as 1880, they were using water diverted from Boulder Creek, and they would sheet flood across the quad to water the quad. Now, interesting side story, I'm going to go down for just a second. So Mrs. Sewell, who was the wife of the president and the main professor, wanted to try to have a lawn. So they brought in some topsoil and they spread some seed out, and the Boulder winds blew and everything blew away. Mrs. Sewell was not to be deterred. Mrs. Sewell got more topsoil, spread more seed, but this time she used bed sheets with rocks on the corners to hold it down until the turf germinated. Then they were using the flood irrigation system to get water to that because they wanted to have a lawn. All these people were from the East Coast and wanted the things they were familiar with seeing back there, and they couldn't quite handle that Boulder was this really dry, semi-arid place, so they really wanted to change it to be the way they thought a campus should look. So the cottonwood has been the beneficiary of pretty consistent watering for its whole life, which is one of the reasons it's done very well. And I'm having a little voice issue. Vince, you want to pick up the cottonwood for just a minute for me?
Well, obviously it's one of the most important landmark trees on campus. I have to look at it a little bit dispassionately, which is hard because it's such a cool tree. But for me, it's a maintenance issue. We have to get climbers up in it every year or every other year to do a careful inspection of it. Obviously, it's a potentially dangerous tree with that size and that soft-wooded of a tree at that age. So we watch it pretty carefully. We have climbers go up and inspect it and remove deadwood. We have keep a pretty close eye on it, and by all accounts, it's an extremely healthy and unusually vigorous and happy tree for that species at that age. For whatever reason, it's just a strong individual tree, and we certainly hope to keep it around several more years. But every year, it kind of has to be looked at pretty carefully, and some hard decisions have to be made. Last fall, several big pieces were taken out of the west side of it because of some dieback and some decay and some issues going on over the Old Main building. You obviously don't want large pieces of cottonwood falling on the Old Main building, so it's kind of a tough tree to watch decline, but we're also lucky to live in a time where we can see it at this stage. So.
And I really agree with Vince. That's one of the neat things, is being able to share with people, because probably in 15 or 20 years that tree won't be there anymore. And it's, to me, kind of amazing that there's a cottonwood that is that upright, that has done that well for so long. When I started in '86, there were 3 or 4 other cottonwoods in the vicinity that, due to their size, I'm almost sure were planted at about the same time, and again, the proximity to Old Main. And what was going on with most of those trees was large amounts of interior decay. And what happens with cottonwoods, willows, silver maples, you get some cavities developing in the tree, and over time those cavities extend all the way down to the base of the tree. And what ends up happening is you've got a lot of weight of growing wood up above, supported by very little on the bottom. And as we did some testing and poking and understanding what was going on with those other trees, decided they needed to be removed. And as we took them down, we saw a number of them, where the base of the tree is about as big around as I can get my arms, and there was basically only 4 or 5 inches of sound wood around the outer edges, and the interior was just a big column of decay. There was nothing for 40 feet going up in the tree other than this outer ring of stuff. So that's a very dangerous situation, and again, that's part of the thing I'm concerned about, is liability for trees and also people's lives. I got to tell you, when it's blowing 80 miles an hour and people are walking under that tree, I'm nervous. And the other thing that happens is a tree that size has a certain symmetry, and I'm sure there are people that are better understanding of engineering than I am, but I just know there's a lot of relationship with how that tree does with other parts of that tree, and the more pieces of it that get compromised and the more the tree is out of balance, it's just kind of a recipe for going downhill. It's kind of unfortunate, but it's also really exciting to be able to share that tree with you, and I can take it back to the 4th graders again. I know from previous experience that it takes 12 or 13 4th graders to reach around that tree holding hands. And that's always one of the highlights of the walk, is letting the 4th graders figure out how they're going to make that happen, because 50 of them want to do it and only a few can. So, Vince, anything else you'd say about that?
So is that a Plains cottonwood?
That is a Plains cottonwood. If you're a real tree nut, they're actually, I guess, it's the Colorado champion. National champion is out near Hygiene. And as I understand, though, it's a much squatter tree that's much wider at the base. This is actually kind of unique for a cottonwood to really have kind of a strong central leader and kind of a fairly nice branching pattern. It's not real typical. We can't see it right here, but if you we start going to the west a little bit, if you look back around the corner, you'll see another cottonwood that I believe was planted at that same time. It's maybe 1/3 the size, and it also has got a very dramatic lean to the east, and it's just not as nice of a tree. Again, this is really kind of unique. Of the 42 that they bought, I suspect that this one, for a lot of reasons, there are a lot of reasons it's still here. And I think the fact that it has a good central leader, it was just kind of a robust individual, it's just been a blessed tree, and I'm excited to share it with you, but like Vince, I'm kind of fatalistic about it, because sooner or later it is going to no longer be there. So enjoy it while you can. While I'm standing right here, I can point out another English oak. Remember, we saw a couple of those in the education courtyard, then we saw the columnar variety. So this tree is probably just another 15 or 20 years beyond the ones that we saw back in the education courtyard. And again, this one's got that really deep green, lustrous color, so that's just a little bit of a difference about it. As we were approaching, somebody asked me a question about tree pruning in general. Kind of what we're doing on campus is Vince is always looking for storm damage, obvious dead, breaks, hangers, things that we know are really bad. When possible, we like to try to do structural work for a tree in the first 10 or 15 years of its life. Actually, the structural work starts at the nursery with trying to select a tree that's got a good form and that has good branching patterns. Again, that first 10 or 15 years that it's planted on campus is a good opportunity if some things are going a little bit off to try to correct it. But beyond that, there really isn't a lot of ongoing pruning that happens. We do pruning with some trees for sanitation reasons. If you get an insect problem going, you can lose some branches, try to get those out. Would you describe the pruning differently, Vince, or that's?
No, we're really trying to emphasize structural pruning in the younger trees that we plant, so that the arborists who are working here in 3 or 4 decades don't have some of the same problems we're having. Probably a lot of well-meaning, hard-working people 40 or 50 years ago planted a lot of trees and did not give them the structural basis to grow in a way that would work well in an urban environment like this. They kind of let them just go kind of go native, and when they had sun coming from every direction, they're not in the forest anymore. If there's sun coming in every direction and you're not shaping or training the tree, it's just going to grow like a giant bush or a shrub in every direction. Okay.
Things happen when you're little. Okay.
So, anyways, yeah, we're trying to improve structural work and do as much storm damage and hazard mitigation as we can.
I think the really big part is getting the right tree at a nursery. You know, as you get experience, I mean, a branching connection that's closer to a 90 degree is so much better. These V connections are really suspect, and the more of that you see in a tree, the more cause for concern it is. Now, it's kind of counterintuitive, you know, something like the coffee tree has a fair number of these, but the coffee trees also don't seem to have a real problem with it. But that same branching angle in a silver maple is one of the liabilities about the silver maple. It's just a place that's really prone. You know, let's talk about weather for a second, because that is the biggest single factor that the trees on the Boulder campus have to deal with, is the fact that it's Colorado, it's Boulder, it's Front Range weather. The wind blows 80, 90 miles an hour sometimes. Sometimes it snows, you know, in the middle of October when the trees are still foliated. If the tree's got leaves on it and it gets a snow load, well, this time of year it's always a wet, heavy snow. Those branches and the leaves act like a basket and catch all that stuff. You know how heavy just a single shovelful of that stuff is. Picture that, multiply it by 2,000 and put it in the limbs of that cottonwood. We're talking about a lot of weight. And trees under stress like that have tendencies to fail, and they will end up failing where they have those poor branch connections. So that's why structure is so important. You start off with one that's got good branching patterns that usually won't change over the life of the tree. Boulder's just is a very tough place to be a tree and be successful. I would like to take a second and point out we got 3 trees in a row here, and it's kind of interesting to me how they're all the same tree, but we got 3 different things going on. So the young lady with the backpack just walked past the first honey locust I wanted to talk about. She's now walking conveniently by the second honey locust I'd like to talk about, and soon she'll be at the 3rd honey locust. So we got 3 in a row here that are the same genus and species. But I invite you to look with me. Let's look at this first tree. I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's a really nice, still deep green, looks pretty healthy, got a pretty good canopy. We've done a little pruning work on it because of the light fixture. We're trying to make sure we've got good light penetration for that. You go to the next tree, you scratch your head, and I would wager that those 3 trees were probably planted within a year of one another. So they went in as the same group. The tree in the center has reverted to kind of an original characteristic of the honey locust, and one of the old ID tricks for honey locust was looking for those seed pods, and I think I saw somebody with a couple in their pocket. It's a big, long, kind of a brownish bean. The seeds are much smaller than we saw on the Kentucky coffee tree, but look at how heavily that tree is fruited. Also, you've probably noticed that the tree is a little bit sparser than the first one. And if you get to the 3rd one, well, I don't see any seed pods on it, or very few, and I see that of the 3 trees is the one that's showing the fall color the first. They're all planted at about the same time. They're all basically receiving the same amount of water, same amount of attention. Why is that one going, and why is this one still fully green? Don't know. I mean, that's just trees. That's one of the neat things about trees. They kind of do what they're going to do. One other thing I should point out, having 3 in a row like this is kind of a blessing, but it's also kind of a curse. The curse part of it is, and I know from experience, honey locusts, unfortunately, over the course of the summer, end up with about 15 different insect problems. None are serious enough that they're going to kill the tree, but a lot of years, if the insect is profuse enough, we would actually see even defoliated trees at this time of the year. That's just little chewing insects, little sucking insects. Everybody's getting a little piece of the honey locust. And the fact that they're 3 in a group, or that they're 10 in one area, or they're 15 in a larger area, if you get an insect problem in one tree, you can guarantee you're going to have it in all 15 of the trees. If you get an insect problem, or 5 insect problems in one tree, all of those trees are going to have that same insect problem. That's why Vince and I like to say monoculture is bad. And monoculture is when you plant one type of tree to the exclusion of others. Now, certainly an apple orchard, you're going to plant all apple trees, and I don't mean to be overly judgmental about it, but from an ornamental plant standpoint, variety and diversity is a good thing, and it's neat that it comes through in trees as well. Vince, anything here you want to point out while we're all conveniently looking?
Locust is a nice tree if you're trying to grow turf under it. In a lot of cases, it lets a lot of the light through, so you can have turf and a tree in the same lot if you wish. it is susceptible to a lot of diseases and pests, so it can be a challenge to grow, but it's fairly tough. It tolerates it.
It was also immensely popular with landscape architects.